Hello, Ivan. Welcome to the Builder's Mind podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So, vibe coding became, a very common word around 1.5 years ago, or kind of maybe 2 years ago. But now it's everyone's, talking about it, vibe coding, vibe marketing. So, as a developer, who have been coding or being in the space for many years, do you have a hate or love relationship with vibe coding?
That's a very good question. I mean, the way it started in the beginning, I was really against, let's say, using AI to code, especially when it's like work related stuff. I was mainly concerned about privacy and then also the security and, you know, the quality of the code that these tools produce. Over the last 6 months, I would say I've changed my mind quite a lot on that, and I'm using a lot of AI to build and to write code. Had a love and hate relationship. I started like really against it, and maybe because the tools were not advanced yet, right? They were like you can write a very small snippet. Um, Context wise was like very limited, so the results were not good. But I think that's changing, and obviously I'm building a tool that helps people write with code. I've obviously changed my mind on that quite a bit.
And what are the tools that you're using yourself?
Yeah, so I started using with kind of GitHub Copilot, which directly integrates in VS Code, which is doing quite a lot of the coding and helping with that. And I'm using a lot of V0 by Vercel. I really like their tool, especially with the tech stack that they have. Obviously, V0 is very good with Next.js. And I myself, my focus is on backend. So my front end is not as good as backend development, but that's why I need a tool like V0 that will help me with like the small things that, small gaps that I'm missing in front end development. So in terms of, the array of AI tools that I use for coding is basically just GitHub Copilot and V0. I haven't, got to using Cursor or Windsurf or these other guys kind of in a day-to-day manner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, what is the thinking, of a developer when they want to choose the tool?
I don't know. I mean, for me, first is convenience. I would say probably convenience. Don't leave the current tools I'm using, right? Because I don't want to create like new habits and learn new tools. And I know that Cursor and Windsurf and these guys are, forks of VS Code, pretty much, VS Code with a added AI. For me, it's convenience and then also the results that it produces. And for me, I'm not at the stage where, let's say, it's 90% AI, 10% me. It's more of a, let's say, 30% AI and 70% me writing the code. So it's still a lot of, about the results, the small things, specific things that I need. Would these tools deliver that? Are they reliable in the results as well that they produce? And then, yeah, how quickly can I get to the goal and like build the thing that I need to? So that's kind of my thinking about it. I don't think there's anything deeper in, for me personally. Maybe there's other people out there that, have different way of like evaluating the tools that they use. But for me, that's personally how I do it.
Yeah, because from my chat with some founders, they find selling to developers very hard because kind of it's a kind of different market and community. Also, we chatted before the recording, so we'll talk about it a bit later as well. But before going deep dive to the main topic of today, Line0 and everything you're building, I would love to hear what is your personal journey to building startups. So how did you start kind of jumping to startups?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've been building things from a very young age. I always wanted to build something on my own. A very, classic cliche thing to say. It's something that really attracted me is like building stuff and like just actually working on something myself. And then I was at university, then I needed a job. I joined a very early a very early stage startup called GameStake Technology. I actually joined as an intern there and then quickly progressed as the lead backend engineer and then replaced the CTO as the head of engineering there within a year and a half. So for me, it was a great thing to work in a startup early on in my career to learn a lot of the things, what mistakes not to do, how to do things, how to iterate quickly, how to speak with people and customers and so on. And then it was a matter of like, when am I going to build a startup? And I never wanted to work in a, big corporate job. That never attracted me. So all my developer friends like working like big tech and I know their day-to-day job and just that doesn't excite me. So for me, it was also always like, when am I going to build a startup? I always wanted and knew that I'm going to build a startup. I've tried a few times, both, back home and then here in London as well. But now I'm doing it first time properly, starting a startup, building a product and, giving a proper go.
Amazing. And what convinced you that, this is the right time to actually go build something by your own? Kind of, was it some skills that you got or the moment?
I think it was a combination of a few things. First was the skills and kind of I worked at GameStake for 4 years. So I've seen a lot of it from pretty much the beginning because I joined the company before it was even funded, right? And then I was there for 4 years. I kind of got confident in myself that I can build stuff, and then now is the time. But I guess the biggest thing is having kind of build up my personal runway to be able to build without being worried about money, right? So that's the biggest thing. I didn't want to start something and then, I have, 3 months of personal runway and then I need to scramble around and like find some funds, right? So these two things is, just being confident that I can build it, that now is the time to build it. And then, the financial end of it, which I think is equally important.
Perfect. And was Vertex the first idea that came out to your mind, or like did you try out something else?
Yeah, so the way it started was, the idea kind of changed quite a lot, which is normal, right? And I started thinking about how I can build it how can I help developers build backend services? It was still related with backend, right? How to build backend services, deploy them easily, more of a no-code, low-code solution. That's how I started. But then I quickly realized that this is not very scalable for backend. I think it works great for when you get to UI, like front end, web apps, mobile app, etc., because you can visualize it very easily. And then, when it came to backend, I was like, I don't think that no code is going to work for that. So I started experimenting with different ideas. I actually started with this open source API library, which we still have and we're going to continue maintaining. But that open source library was basically a bunch of reusable API modules. You have the equivalent of ShatCN for UI, right? But this was for the APIs. And then from there, start helping developers with code generation. And then in the future, it's going to be with infrastructure design and then also deployments. So I would say that in terms of field or like industry was always backend related, because that's where I personally am very good at, that expertise, if you want to say that, right? That's why I'm very good with like writing backend code, databases, cloud infrastructure, and so on. And then, the little details, how I execute and how I get to the end goal of helping backend devs deliver better services in a more secure way, which is very important in backend. These little things about how we get there change over time.
Yeah. And do you have co-founders for this, or are you doing this alone?
So currently doing it solo. I actually started with a friend of mine, but things didn't quite work out. So we decided to split early on, which I think was a very good decision because, as we know, startup kind of co-founder falling apart is like one of the big reasons for startups failing. So we started together and we split because things didn't work out. But right now I'm doing it solo, and you never know. I'm completely open to finding the right person. I get that question a lot, especially with solo versus non-solo founders. Is a very interesting question. And then, people are curious to understand what are my thoughts on that. But yeah, right now solo. And if I find the right person, then happy to get them on board.
I think, instead of having an okay co-founder team, it's better to have the base solo team, So
I think so, because I believe that even if you start with a co-founder, but things don't work out a year or two from now, the startup has a very good chance of failing again, right? So it's like you have a brain and then half of that brain is leaving, right? And then things will probably be messy between the 2-3 people, whatever, how many is the founding team. And then it's not good, right? So I don't really understand why a lot of people push for co-founders no matter what. I'm not on the co-founder no matter what. I'm like finding the right person. It's very important to have the right person, because the reason for me personally is because I want to really achieve something that's, great and build a great company. And no matter if it's going to be Vratix, Line0, whatever the product is, but I don't want a silly reason like a bad co-founder or some dispute not work out, right?
Yeah. Like for me, the way that I test this, if, there is a kind of chemistry between me or some people that could be like potential co-founder, is that can I think loud with them? Can I brainstorm with them? Because if I can think twice before saying something to my co-founder, then that means that I'm afraid of openly sharing my opinions, and then I'm also kind of afraid that how they will judge. But this should not be the case. So you should just be open about, and that's something that I do. Like, can I feel good just to brainstorm or not?
I think that's a very good way to put it. If you cannot be transparent and open and say what's on your mind with, your co-founder, then it's not a co-founder, it's an employee, right? Because with an employee, you kind of don't want to mention things, don't want to maybe hurt their feelings or whatever. But with a co-founder, you need to be trying to, share whatever you want and not be worried that they're going to get offended or hurt their feelings. Yeah, it's a
Exactly.
good way you put it there.
Yeah, like there should be no politics, you know?
Yeah, 100%. No, between the co-founder, there shouldn't be no politics at all.
Great. So talking of Vertex and Line0, so the company has a different name and then the product has a different name. So why there is this thinking behind it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm very bad with naming stuff, like naming products. It takes me a lot of time to think of something good, and maybe I'm overthinking it. But at the same time, any good name that I come up with, the domain is taken, so that's a big problem as well. Or it costs like $1 million, which I don't have right now, to pay for a domain name. So the way it started is, we with the friend that started the company, we're like, okay, let's just get a name. It's not that important for Vratix, right? That's when it started with the company name. Just get a name. It's short, sounds okay, and then we got the .com domain. That's very transparent how we got it. There's like no meaning behind the name, nothing. We just didn't want to spend too much time on a name because that was like, for us, was not that important at that point. We wanted to get a product out, we wanted to get something out, and of course you need a name for that product. And then as things evolved, I always wanted to have the products that I'm building and the company separate in a way, because it's much more easier when you have a product name to kind of rebrand it, change it. In terms of like legal stuff, admin stuff, it's much easier to just do that rather than, do the whole restructuring of like changing a company name and associating that company name with a product. And that kind of locks you to maybe a single product. It's very difficult to build different things. And then, if that product doesn't work out, then you'll have the same name for a new product, then people might associate it with the wrong thing. So it's much easier to pivot, experiment, change the product, build something else, when the two company kind of business legal name, whatever you want to call it, and the product, actually the marketing name, the trading name is different. So that was my thinking. And then with Line0 is just also, again, struggled quite a lot with the name, like picking a right name. I wanted something that's short and also like connected with backend and related to code generation. So that's why, you have the Line0, which is before even your first line of code. We're here to help you get from nothing to your first endpoint in a few seconds, right? And that's kind of like the thinking about it. And I think that it's a good name in terms of like it's short, difficult to mistake. Like I got all the different domain variations. So people, when they type, because you have the zero, is it going to be a number? Is it going to be the word? So I covered all of that. So that's kind of the thinking behind it, why I wanted to have like two separate names. And then in the future, when we have more names, it's going to be, different names for these products as well.
Line 1, line 2, just like kind of...
yeah. We can keep it topical.
Yeah, sure. So it will be amazing if you can, shortly pitch Line0, what it is and who it is for, but also like what are, the main values.
Yeah, sure. So Line0 is a AI pair programmer for backend developers, right? It's been built and designed with backend developers in mind first. So it will help you build backend API services with AI, just prompting, right? As the beginning of Line0, we're going to expand to having, as I mentioned, infrastructure design. So helping you with AI to pick the right services for, like AWS has like 400 different services. Which one is the best one for your use case? And then later on, help you deploy it very simply, like all your backend infrastructure. Hopefully you generated the code with us and then you deploy by us. We started with code generation because I think it's very easy to build a trust and brand around that tool to begin with. And then we're going to, expand with like the different tools and products in the future. Right now, the product is very early stages. Literally been building it for the last 2 months. We just released our public beta, and then we're going to start iterating from here, right? As I told you, the marathon starts now, right? So it's going to be a lot of iterations, adding new tools and adding very backend specific things to help you, build secure, scalable, and robust API services.
Amazing. And you're focusing on backend developers for now.
Yes. So our target users is technical people. It's important to note it's not built for non-technical people. If you're non-technical, you won't be able to use it. And to be honest, I don't see a use case for a non-technical person to build backend APIs. So it's got to be developers starting with smaller startups with limited engineering team resources. And then as we expand support for more languages, more frameworks, as we go to cloud and infrastructure, then we go up market to bigger companies, larger enterprises, and so on.
And did you see that the already existing solutions are missing something that you want to kind of, provide with Line0?
Yeah, so I think that, we have a lot of amazing tools like Lovable, V0, Cursor, Windsurf, right? They're great and they do the job that they've been built for. But in the example of Lovable, V0, and Replit as well, they're built for non-technical people, right? So that's why they say we want to help this 99% of people that cannot code actually build stuff. And in the case of Cursor and Windsurf and GitHub Copilots, they're very generic copilots in the sense that they can help you write any code, right? They're not fine-tuned or optimized to build an API service, for example, according to best practices, how to structure it, how to architect the actual service. They kind of fill in the gaps. Like one of the users that I interviewed over the last few months, it was a very good thing that he said is that, Cursor is great, but I still need to give a structure. I still need to tell it how to build a service, right? But then it fills in the gaps. With Line0, I'm aiming for the developers to not even have to explain and tell it how to structure or architect the service, right? So it's a tool that is very specific in terms of like the broad software development industry, right? And we built a tool that's very good for one specific need, for one specific subset of users. And a lot of the people that I've also interviewed, they're feeling that backend is being left out from that whole vibe coding, wave of new tools and so on. So that's why I wanted to build something very specific for backend, help them to actually build very good services. So that's kind of like what I saw and what other people are seeing. Kind of there's overlap and there's patterns in the same things. So that's kind of the whole thinking there.
Great. And it will be the base to have a kind of live demo and just see how it is. I have used it yesterday, but I'm not a technical person, so I didn't know what's happening there, just except
Yeah. So sure, let me just share my screen. All right, can you see this?
Yes, I see it.
Cool. So very standard. You get that prompt filled here, and what we can start asking now is like to build a API service for an e-commerce website. I'm going to start with a very simple prompt, and I'm going to show you how we even help with prompt enhancement. As we know, with like any AI tool, your prompts are the most important thing. How you structure them, you have the whole thing about prompt engineering, structuring your prompt, giving detailed, deep instruction for the model to be able to get the best results out there. So we'll start by just typing very simple prompt. So very simple, create a backend service for an e-commerce website. So the first way we help developers or our users to improve their prompt is by having autocomplete suggestions. So it kind of predicts what is your use case. And the more you build within a specific project, the better these suggestions come. So I can just press tab and have it auto-filled. And the other thing that we have is this prompt enhancement tool that is going to take our one sentence prompt and actually build a very detailed product specification instruction for our service for the model how to build it. So you can see how it goes into different details, like what is the database, what are the type of endpoints that we want, very specific routes and endpoints that we need, for example, using caching, what type of database, and so on. So it actually got way more detailed. So that should produce way better results and way more accurate to what we actually want to get as an outcome. We start generating now. Line0 is going to start thinking and analyzing your query, your prompt, how to build it. It's going to start explaining it and then starting setting up the actual project structure. So as I mentioned, we start with these open source API modules, and Line0 uses these open source modules and templates that we have as the initial kind of foundation of each project, right? So that's why I said we're going to continue maintaining these open source modules, but we're going to use them within Line0 to produce even better results. So that way we have a mixture of human written code, right? Plus stuff generated by AI. Very typical, coding tool. You have your code editor here. You can see the different changes. It explains it, gives you a summary of the new things that it just implemented. The new endpoints as well. So in the future, we're going to have, flowchart diagrams here within the chat as well. And then, for example, we can go to server TS, which was a file that's part of this initial basic template. And we can see what are the different changes that it added. So for example, here it added rate limits, right? We can see the different packages that it added. So it's going to handle all the packages for you that you need as well while as it's generating code. And we can see that, it added the auth routes, it added like order schemas to validate your endpoints. And then, you have your controllers with your business logic here, various middlewares, and then we can continue building within the same chat. But one thing that I've built within Line0, which I think is pretty important, is of being able to create a new chat within the same project. And that way the context length is much shorter for a specific feature. So the idea here is that developers should be splitting features into separate chats, right? That way Line0 will produce much, much better results because, I mean, right now we have just one message here, right? So it's not a big problem. But, when we have, like, let's say 20 messages in the same chat, the context length can become quite big, and then Line0 can produce not optimal results. So I wanted to have that new chat functionality here, which, for example, we're going to start by asking to add, let's say, password reset functionality.
But also kind of my question here is that, so what are, the part of the code which you ask, Line0, and what are the part of the code that you as a developer should actually code it yourself?
Yeah, so, I mean, the idea here is that Line0 should be able to get you literally from no lines to fully working API service, right? With minimal additional coding from the developer side. Right now, you're not able yet to edit code within the code editor. This is coming very soon. It's like one of the things that I got as a feedback from the public beta. We want to be able to modify those files within the browser. So it should be kind of a balance of it's more than 80% of your service is written by Line0, and then you have the little extra 20% that you need written by yourself. You can like connect it with GitHub and then continue building Cursor or Windsurf or these other tools and then come back, right? So for example, we have this GitHub integration that has a two-way synchronization between Line0 and a repository in your GitHub account. So if we go ahead and just connect it, Line0 is actually going to replicate the same project with the commit history in your GitHub account. And then you'll be able to, clone that repository locally and continue building in VS Code or Cursor or Windsurf, make changes there. Then Line0 is going to synchronize them back, and then you can continue building specific things for backend within Line0. Ideally, as much as we can should be kind of handed over to Line0, but then the little specific, you'll be able to connect it to GitHub and then continue building. It's taking a bit of time because replicating the whole project.
This is amazing because if it saves, 80% of the work for the developers, then they can just spend, building more things. So
the whole idea of the tool that I'm building with Vratix, with the tagline that I have for Vratix as a company is a developer efficiency company, right? We want to make developers much more efficient, free up time for innovation, and actually focusing on the important bits when you build a product. Not like with these repetitive tasks and, doing things that slow you down. The idea here is going from a 5-week development cycle to less than a day, let's say, right? To get your service, get it out there and actually push it and start building stuff. So I'm going to show you how we have it on GitHub. So we have the same project that we created on Line0. We can see the commit history here, which is great because you can either revert, you can see how it builds the things, and then you can clone it. So you can clone it locally. Yeah. And okay. Yeah. So basically what I did is I cloned the service, right? And you can see the code base here. You can see everything that Line0 created already, right? And then we can install the dependencies and then we can run it locally. And then you have your service running. And you can see how it took like just a few minutes to get a fully working service. You have all your routes here. Now, I won't be able to test it because I need to connect it with a database and set up everything. But basically, you can see how instead of like spending a few days to set up this basic stuff, you get it running and you have a fully working service in just a few minutes. Now, as I mentioned, it's very basic right now what we got, but we're gonna be adding more functionality and actually getting to that above 80% threshold that's being written by Line0.
Yeah. It's kind of a question out of curiosity because I use Lovable and other no-code solution. And for me, I never read the code because first of all, I don't know the code. Also, I don't read the prompt, I just ask ChatGPT and then I don't see the whole prompt, I just copy paste and then I can see the front end is nice. Yeah, it says what I did. So my question is that how important is to actually read the prompt? And I feel that the backend developers might go actually line by line of the code to see if it's actually what it is that they want or no.
Yeah, so it's a great thing. And that's why I think that you need to be technical to use Line0 because with front end, you can visualize it. You can see if it actually delivered your end goal, right? Or you can say change that button to a different color or whatever. With backend, you do need to understand the code that has been written, right? To some degree, you need to understand that. Okay, I I've asked it to build me an e-commerce, a backend service for an e-commerce website. Do we have the necessary endpoints? Do we have the necessary integrations with a database? Do we have the right authentication endpoints? Do we validate each request, right? And then, understand it, and then if necessary, make changes to actually be able to have a working backend service. So that's why it is not built for non-technical people. That's why, for example, yourself, you wouldn't have a good use case, you wouldn't be able to use it. And yeah, I think it's important to be able to understand what is the prompt, how the prompt is written, and then what results it outputs.
My follow-up question is that, is there a feedback loop, where, for example, me as a backend developer, let's assume that I see that, okay, some of the lines are not correct, or maybe it's not as I wanted, and then I improve it myself, so I comment it. Is there kind of a feedback loop where me as a backend developer can contribute to Line0 and then share my code or like my upgraded one for you, just so that you upgrade, the system as well?
So right now we're collecting, the generations and your prompts, and then we're going to be using that to fine tune the models and get the better results closer to what the users actually want as an output, right? My overall goal is for Line0 to learn from your personal style of a developer. Each developer has like naming conventions, how they structure the project, specific things and needs. Let's say when we go to a team or a company, they might have like specific ways to build their services internally. The goal is to be able to learn from that as you build more with Line0, to be able to change those system prompts and then get it to closer to results that you actually need and expect.
My next question is that I think that, for example, the people that I know who are developers, they like coding and they love it, so they like sitting next to the computer and then typing, coding for hours or years as well. So my question is that, do you think that developers, they need to rethink their day-to-day job, not being, just coding, but also, just to work with AI, to become more supervisor and then look at the code and then, just fine tune or like, fix some part of the code, but not, being the one to actually write the whole code. Yeah. So do you feel that developers need to change their mindset, or still, that's the case, that they need to code, but less code?
I think so. I think that the software developer job will become a more supervisory one, as you described it. It's too important to understand the fundamentals behind how technology works, how it's being built, how languages work, right? And then in the end of the day, developers we're problem solvers, right? So how you write it, it's just a different tool right now, right? Like before we had we started from like a very low level programming languages, and now we have things like Python, or Golang that make it super simple. Now with AI, I think, programming languages is English basically, or whatever native language that you use. So you still would need, in my opinion, understand how to write code, how to edit it, what the output you expect. But it's got to be more and more kind of supervisory role. Yeah.
Okay. And what is then like the next product after Line0 that you want to add?
Yeah. So, as part of Line0, there's going to be a lot of different features like documentation generation. There's going to be this live preview sandboxes. So as you said, with Lovable V0, you can get an instant preview of the website. With backend, it's very difficult to visualize it. So what I want to have is actually a preview sandbox within the browser. Let's say we just now generate our service. The only way to test it is to clone it locally and then test it via Postman, run a server, connect my database. The idea is to be able to do that within Line0 and to have it that live preload and have it kind of instantly reflect the changes and be able to test it. So that's kind of the immediate goals there. Have that API client in the browser, have documentation generation and hosting, have like dependency visualization. And then long term, as I mentioned, Line0 and Vratix, so the company is going to go towards infrastructure, backend infrastructure, designing that with the help of AI, and then also having a fully autonomous cloud provisioning with AI. So that would be, monitoring of your performance, costs. Do we have unutilized compute, or do we need to scale certain service? And all of that self-healing and so on with the help of AI, right? So we kind of have the DevOps job, but fully automated and hand it over to AI. We're a bit far from, I think, people trusting AI with their infrastructure. But I think by the time that Vratix gets to that stage as a company, first, the models are going to be much more robust, and, we will be having much better outcomes. And then I think at that point, we'll be able to, trust AI with these mission critical, let's say, tasks.
And do you see the point where you will be connected to a more kind of front end no code solution that you can actually, both be more efficient together. So the backend is there, and then they just add the like front end, like maybe Lovable or like some other.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because I had it with one of these companies. I don't want to mention it right now, but we had a discussion with one of these companies where Line0 actually becomes the backend solution for them, right? Because they're focusing for front-end, non-technical people. And when you get to a more complex solution, full stack solutions, in my opinion, won't be sufficient at this point. It's, a lot of them have security issues. So standalone service could become necessary for these people. So we've been discussing with some company for Line0 to become that partner for backend. So I definitely see it as a I guess a way to expand and help people to build, right? Like imagine like you have your website, you have like a button that says generate me the backend, and then internally we understand what is the service, what is the front end, how to connect and generate the API necessary to power those services.
Yeah. Just one question out of curiosity from validation that did you find some interesting facts about developers that you didn't know before?
That's a good one. Actually, no. I mean, I've seen a lot of similarities into what I've experienced as a developer, especially because I worked in a startup and the people I interviewed were mainly developers and CTOs within startups. One thing that maybe was surprising, it's a good use case when a company wants to rewrite their service. So they want to go from language A to language B for performance or scalability reasons. They need to stop development and actually building new things for a few months because the whole team, or like, let's say 50% of the team needs to focus on that new language and rewriting it, right? And then with Line0, like that's the need for one of the CTOs I've spoken with. He wants a service that he can very easily get an existing backend that's already working. They have documentation. It's already connected with a live platform, but rewrite it with minimal effort to a different language. So that was, I guess, a surprising good use case that I didn't expect. But other than that, I think it was a lot of similarities between what I've experienced as a developer, what I've seen as a developer, which is great validation for my initial hypothesis, right? And then we're going to be changing based on, now real user data from the public beta.
Yeah, I think it's a missed moment to move slowly on the sales and marketing because we touched a bit that in the beginning. So how, the sales process to developers or, this like DevTools are happening and how are you convincing them?
Yeah, so I have a post on LinkedIn as well that we developers, we don't like sales pitches.
I read
if you try to sell something to us, I think you're gonna lose us very quickly. Personally, I'm speaking from my experience and also being on the other side of like speaking to other people and selling them stuff, like just dry sales. A developer will use your tool, especially when it's a developer tool, when they trust you and when you actually solve their issue, right? When with their specific problem. Now, the way you do this is by, I think, and I believe is by building a community first approach, right? You have that product like growth, you build an amazing product, and then you just don't stop talking about it, right? And you just tell everyone, you appear on podcasts like yours, you post on LinkedIn as much as you don't want to post on LinkedIn. Me as a developer and technical person, it could be quite challenging to, get out of my way and like post stuff, right? But it's very important. And I think that's at least for the first 12 months of our, first 12 months of our product, this is a very necessary way to do it. And then from then on, yeah, sure, we expand to, proper sales, go to speak with enterprises and then actually sell to bigger teams. But at that point, the product is going to be much more mature. We're going to have that infrastructure deployment and provisioning, but we need to start by building that brand trust. That's how I will approach it with Vratix and Line0. And I think that's the way that developers too will do it. And I've been speaking with a lot of competitors and a lot of other dev tools in the last few months. All of them say, yeah, I mean, community-based approach is the way to do it, especially with dev tools.
Yeah, and I think it takes a bit of time to build a community, but if you're building one, it's going to be your strength.
100%. I mean, it is difficult, but it's, as I said, it's a marathon and you just need to be consistent. Don't stop showing up. And then when you deliver, good things for your ICP, for your ideal customer profile, then, when you give them, maybe a good blog article or an interesting post with like some good insights on LinkedIn or whatever, you build a great product that solves a specific pain point, or even if it's a specific feature that is missing from your competitor, then I think it's very easy to build that community.
Are there some platforms where you're focusing a lot on building your own community?
Twitter, So if you're on Twitter, go and follow me. But Twitter, I think because there's a very, very good developer community of early adopters as well, which is very important. People there are trying a lot of things all the time. LinkedIn is not a great place for developer tools, but for example, that's how we got in touch together, right? So it's a great way to get different opportunities, maybe not customer related. And then it's all about, being on different developer forums, sharing insights, interacting with the community, and then, reaching out to people as well. I've spoken with so many developers and CTOs, and I'm going back to the list and saying, look, we've been speaking about this tool that I'm going to build. Now it's live. Go and check it out. And then, as I said, if you've built something great, people will use it and they will share it with their friends and so on. And that's how it starts. But, it takes time for the ball to start rolling, right? It's just be everywhere consistently, and then things are going to happen. And the other thing that I'm going to be relying on a lot on is filming demos and tutorials on how to build with Line0, right? So explaining the different nuances of the platform. How can you achieve and get great results that may not be obvious for a first-time user? So these are things that I'll definitely be relying on.
Yeah. I think that it's quite an interesting time now because the mindset have changed. People are open to try out new tools. They trust that there are actually useful tools, but there are a lot of them. So for developers, it's a bit hard to kind of distinguish. But if you're making good content, where it actually gives value to the readers or listeners, then they're actually going to use it. So building a useful content, because I have read your article on this developer community. So that was something, that actually, you just list and then you just actually write something yourself very genuinely, and then it works, it provides value.
Exactly, yeah. And, you don't know what's going to blow up. It's a bit random. You can kind of optimize for virality. You can try to do it. But the thing is, if it's just good value for users or your audience, then it's gonna work.
Are there some hard learnings from making content or just building your brand and the community, like company brand?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is just be consistent, because as I said in one of my posts, is you get 10 views, 10 reads on an article, 10 views on a video, and then that can actually demotivate you big time to stop and not continue. But then you get on the 10th article or the 10th content that you put out there and it gets 200,000 views, right? And then out of nowhere, you get a lot of users, a lot of followers, a lot of attention into what you're building, what you're doing. But that's the number one thing, is this, because I'm getting 10 views or 100 views or reads, shouldn't slow me down, and I should just continue putting stuff out there. Then, just, I think, be honest and share from my own personal experience. I think a lot of people want to connect with you as a person. And that's why I'm trying to build my founder profile rather than a company social profile, right? Because people connect with people. So I think that's obvious in retrospect. That's the approach I started using. I think that's the right way to do it. So these are the two main things I think that I've learned so far.
Thank you. That's great. Moving to our last part, which I asked random questions, and then I would like to have your thoughts on them. I mean, you're a developer, you're CTO, but now you are also being the founder, the CEO, CMO. So lots of other titles, lots of other tasks. And I assume that there are more tasks which are related to business than actually coding. So how are you dealing with them? Self-learning, peer support, or how did you get the courage to actually just...
Yeah, it's a lot of long days and nights first, but I'm a very curious person in terms of I want to learn things and I want to experiment with different things. I have a very commercially open mind, if that makes sense, for a developer, right? So that's a big thing, to be able to understand the value that you provide to a customer, how to provide it. And then it's all about learning. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing my accounting myself. I'm doing some, legal stuff myself with the help of services and so on. But I also have a lot of founder friends. A lot of them are in Y Combinator as well. They've been a great support. I have a few friends that work in VCs. So they've been helping with, pitch decks and, helping with fundraise and some, tricks and tips that you wouldn't hear otherwise if you're an outsider, right? And that's been a great thing. Your personal network as a founder is very important. Being able to lean on these people, message them on WhatsApp and say, how would you do that? How should I handle this issue? And then, they give you some advice. Obviously, you shouldn't listen to all the advice, but it's good to get that outside opinion, especially as a solo founder. I need to rely on, myself 100% of the times, right? But it's good to get that other view of like how people do it and then make a decision for myself. Then yeah, it's just being curious and being open to learn things. And I say there's a lot of, long days and hours and nights that, just figure out things yourself.
I had a mentor who was saying that you have to be afraid of developers who can talk. Developers who have business mindset, because they can do 100% of everything. They can code, they can sell.
I was joking with a friend of mine because, that launch video for the public beta, I had to use someone else to make it. But I was saying to my friend, like, if I learn how to edit videos, that'll be the final thing and I'll be unstoppable, right? Because I'll be able to do anything, right? I'm doing my own design, I'm doing my own logos, I'm doing my own marketing, I'm building the product myself, I'm appearing on, podcasts and whatever. Yeah, that was the final thing with the video. Yeah, didn't have time for that.
I think I can help you, with just like share some tips and tricks. And then it's a 30-minute thing, man, not much. Yeah. So the next question is that what is the future of backend developers?
Yeah, so I think it's very, that autonomous way of building and maintaining infrastructure. I think a lot of it is going to be focused around cloud and how you provision these services, make them as autonomous in the sense of like, fixing their own bugs, self-recovery, optimizing for costs. Maybe pinging the developer that there's an issue and they should look into, and maybe just have a button say, yes, I approve that you need to change that infrastructure, or we need to redeploy, whatever it is. I think that in the next, maybe even shorter than that, in the next few years, that's going to happen with backend. That's going to be a thing that moves forward in terms of like using AI as the core foundation to build and manage these services. And that's why I'm building Line0. I'm trying to get ahead of that curve and be one of these first companies out there that do that.
Yeah. Just another question is, what are the tips for no coders to know for using the no code solution for building something? Like, for example, what's like the tip for me as a no coder?
I think it's a difficult question. It's a good question. But let me think about it for a second. I mean, you need to understand what you're doing when you're building these things. With a lot of these tools, there's a lot of freedom now that you get access to a code. So a lot of people that don't know what they're doing and how it's being built can introduce security vulnerabilities. We're seeing that as a big issue with a lot of tools, and a lot of people don't understand why something happened, right? And we don't want to build a unsecure internet for our users, especially when you have customers, right? You want it to be secure. You want to maintain that level of robustness that you get with human developers. And it's great that a lot of people, we're opening up building products to the rest of the 99% of that who cannot code. But we just need to be very careful how we build it, double check everything, make sure it's working, make sure that you don't have anything that leaks. And I think, all of these tools are building guardrails around that. But that's, I think, my number one advice is just be careful and understand what you're actually doing, especially before launching it live to users and getting their, credit cards, debit cards, whatever it is.
Yeah, because these no-code solutions give people lots of confidence, in terms of building, and you can see lots of tools being launched without any hard thinking, and then some of them work, some of them don't work. My last question will be, what do you do on the weekends?
Right now I work all the time on the weekends, but I do watch Formula 1 a lot, and to exercise I go for a run or go to a gym. But right now my weekends and my weekdays are kind of blended together for the last 7-8 months, so unfortunately I don't have a day off.
Okay, I hope you will have soon.
Hopefully, we'll see. We need to push a bit in the beginning. So
also kind of, building is it's not a job. It's more kind of a hobby for the builders. So it's not get you tired and you don't feel bored of it.
Yeah, I mean, even like before when I had a job, I was doing outside things in my free time to build stuff. Like I'm the type of person that doesn't like staying around and like not doing anything. So I prefer to fill in my time with building stuff. Now 100% of that time is dedicated for building my own thing, which is great, right? So it's always great to build things. So it doesn't feel like a requirement that I need to push and I'm not gonna have a weekend. Hopefully I'm gonna have soon, but that's the life in the beginning.
Thank you. It was great having you, Ivan, for this podcast, and yeah, I hope to see you soon in person as well.
Yeah, cheers. It was great to meet you as well. Take care. Bye bye.